Hello, ladies and gentlemen. In this video, I'm going to be talking about my Bitcoin predictions, my educated guess, why I don't have a clue what I'm talking about, and where I think Bitcoin's going to be going in the next few months. So this is currently where I sit on TradingView, somewhere around the middle of November to the end of November. I'm expecting to see $250,000 for the value of Bitcoin, and I consider this to be the top. Now, just to preface this, I may be wrong, as may everybody with their educated guesses. I'm going to explain why I believe this. I'm going to break that down. But I also struggle because there's a 2-month window between November and January, which invalidates one of my arguments, but it also makes another one. So I'm going to err on the side of caution, and I'm going to look to exit the market around November, and this is why. So we need to first come back, and I'm going to scroll out and I'm going to explain what I'm looking at, why I've created this vision. Because at the end of the day, and I can't stress this enough, there is no such thing as an expert in crypto. It does not exist. Everybody is guessing. Everybody is trying to make educated guesses, but nobody knows what's going to happen. And even a broken clock is right twice a day. So with that being said, this is my non-expert educated guess, and it's nothing more than a thesis and an opinion, and until it's proven wrong, it's the one I'm going to go with. I've done very well in the past, and so I'd like to think I've got some sort of a handle on not only the technical analysis but also the fundamental analysis. All right, so let's break this down. You can see here that we've got this bottom signal here at 3,700. Now the exact numbers don't matter, but back in March on 2020, in March, we can see this point. This was kind of a low point. And if we go back even further, you can see this red line here has held very, very strong back through 2017, after the 2018 market, back into 2020 before the last bull run. And we've never kind of been back there. And I think that this is a point. I think we hit these points, and I think this was a point. And I do not believe we're ever going to go back below this point. The same thing can be said for the 16K mark. I don't believe we're going to come back down and ever go below 16K Bitcoin again. I just don't believe it's possible for us to do that. But I don't know what that is for this cycle. It could be the 48,000 mark. That may be true. But if we look back at this 2020 line, and you can see where we drew this up, we drew this line. It actually connected here in September. And then it was broken in 22, the crash we had. If we look at the big crash we had at the end of 2021, going into 2022, around May 22, we had the big crash and we broke this line, and we never recovered until January. Until January this year, we had a hard rejection from it, and then we broke it in February. And so just for context, so you understand, the candles that are printed, the red and green candles that are printed, the more they touch a line, the stronger that line technically is. And I can create a line at any point, and I can create a story as to why this line is important. Oh, well, this is important because. And so everyone has their thesis. If it becomes true or not remains to be seen. But this is just a way to create pattern recognition and to use this to form part of a bigger understanding. And if we go back to where I was in 2021. Now, this was the bull run of 2021 that we had. I actually, and I haven't changed this, I've left it as it was, but if we zoom in here, I pretty accurately predicted most of the cycle where we run up from what was the original 30K all the way up to the 42K, that initial first run, and I was not far off. So I've kind of been predicting since. This was my first big prediction that I made public, and I've been doing that since, and the only thing that I got wrong, and I'm not perfect, I did think we would see a blow off top. We did see this this capitulation kind of start to form, but I thought we were going to go higher. I really thought we were going to go higher, and I actually thought we'd see 100K Bitcoin on a 2021 cycle. So I didn't think we were gonna crash down at the end of 2021 the way we did. I thought we had a few more months, but we actually peaked in November, which is ironically why I think we're going to peak this November, because I think November is if we look back at previous cycles and we look at the peak, again, this peaked in December. So we had a peak in December, we had a peak in November, and so November to December, end of the tax year, Christmas, whatever. You know, there's that time of year where I think that the accounting season resets for a lot of people, and so I think people look to balance their books, and I just think we can see a lot of money leave the market around that time of year. So, okay, now coming back to this, we can see this trend line. So the more points it hits, the stronger the trend line becomes. So why is this red trend line important? Well, created it back here. We hit it here. We bounced off of it. We then, again, spent a lot of time here. As you can see, if I just make this a bit bigger, you can start to see, actually, we spent quite a bit of time around here. We rejected off of it here, and then we broke through it here. So I consider this to be a very healthy and a strong trend line. Now, with that being said, if I just remove all of these, we had what is a textbook, what is known as a Kobo. So a Kobo stands for kiss off, bugger off. And what it basically means is that for a trend line, for us to be below a trend line, that is known as resistance. It means it's a ceiling and we need to break through it. It is resisting us from going higher. If, however, we are above the trend line, then it is known as support. It is supporting us from going lower. So resistance and support, with that in mind, this was resistance. We tried to test it here. We got rejected. It was a hard rejection. We then come back to retest it. We did retest it. We broke through. And what normally happens is that is called a flip. When you flip a trend from support to resistance or from resistance to support. So when that happened and when we broke that trend, we then tested that. And so this resistance becomes support. And you see that here. What normally happens is you have your line, you break through, you retest, and then you do what's known as, this is called a Kobo. It stands for kiss off, bugger off. Kobo, Kobo. And it means you retest. So you break the trend, you kiss the trend, and then you bugger off. That is a Kobo. Kiss off, bugger off. And this is textbook. We break through, we retest, we Kobo. We kiss off, we bugger off. And that's exactly what happened here. And I'm going to explain why I believe that this is going to happen again. All right. So now let's come back and let's look at this orange line. So again, we take this trend. We can see that there was a lot of action around here, and we have not broken this yellow trend since. We have not been above this line. Now, you could move this line. You could argue. You could definitely move it. You could make it a bit more attractive. But ultimately, it's a pretty strong line, and it's an indicator that we haven't broken above it. So we're still trapped in this funnel. We're trapped in this kind of wedge here. And we are trending upwards, but we are trapped in here until we break this. So with that being said, the same thing applies to the green line. So in 2020, we pushed away from this. We did retest it in July 21. We then had our peak, and we then come back and we hit it again in 22 in January. We smothered it for a little while, and we have not recovered it since. That is why I think that this red, yellow, and green trend line are very important and very powerful, because they date back to 2020, and they're, I think, good indicators. All right, so let's zoom in. So we can see that we hit the bottom here at the end of 22. That was pretty much the lowest point. We've been slowly trending up since. So you could argue that we started our bull run in January 2023, but this is kind of still early. It feels like it was more just sideways chop until we broke this line. We broke this in January. Now, this was ahead of the Bitcoin halving. This was typically the run up for that. But then when the Bitcoin halving hit, which was around here, nothing happened. In fact, we kind of went sideways. And I think what's really important is that for the halving around this point, just as a run up to the halving, we had this pump. And this pump, for me, has signified what I like to call an ascending bull flag. An ascending bull flag has a pretty vertical entry point, and then it kind of trails down and trails up into a flag shape. This is the Bitcoin flag. So with that being said, this is where I think we are now. I think that we have Kobo'd off of the original resistance, turning it into support. I do not believe that we will come below this line again this cycle. Whether we do at the end of the cycle remains to be seen, but for now, I do not believe that we come down below this line. And that means at this point in time, I do not believe we see anything lower than 54 to 55K Bitcoin. I don't believe you will be able to buy Bitcoin again in this cycle for below 55,000. I just do not believe we'll see it. Will we hit this again? Possibly, and I'll explain why now. So this bull flag, the typical pattern that we're seeing here, how it works, is there is an entry. The entry here is about 45%, okay? That happened over the course of 2 weeks. Okay, so that's how quickly we saw in Bitcoin, we saw a 45% gain in 2 weeks. That's how volatile this can be. Now, what typically happens is we then start trading into this flag, and you can see that from this point here and from this point here. So we're now perfectly trading within this, and we're consolidating in this area. Somewhere around, I would say, somewhere around 75%, so 3/4 of the way through the flag, we can expect to see movement. So the way that this works is whatever way you enter the flag, you exit on the opposite side. So we coming from the bottom, we come out through the top. If this was a descending bull flag, then we would come in from the top and we would exit from the bottom. Hopefully that makes sense. So the pattern works both ways. Now, because we've entered here and we're planning to exit here, well, what can we expect to see and when can we expect to see it? Well, because we had a 45% entry here, we can expect to see a 45% exit somewhere around 3/4 of the way through this. So let's just say here. Then you're going to see where that circle goes. That circle, which is perfectly positioned on that green line, which I've already explained to you, is about 45% from where the entrance of this bull flag was. So if this bull flag plays out as intended, which I believe it will, we can expect around the start of August this year to see $100,000 Bitcoin. And I believe with every part of my fiber and my being that is, and that's not just copium, I truly, truly believe with quantitative easing, with the housing market, with the automobile bubble, when we look at inflation, when we look at politics, when we look at elections coming up around the end of the year, this is the perfect catalyst. When we look at the S&P 500, when you look at the top 3 companies within the S&P 500, when you look at the US Treasury and bonds, when I take the macro and the micro and we consider everything, which I'm not going into detail, but when we start to consider every little detail, you start to see that there are many, many points and roads that lead to here. And so what I believe is going to happen is I believe that we're going to pretty much bypass this yellow line. I think we're just going to shoot straight through it. And I think we're going to come up over the course of a couple of weeks and we're going to hit this. So this is going to happen quickly. Now, when we hit this, I believe we're going to do what's called a Kobo. I believe we're going to break the resistance, turn it into support, kiss off, and bugger off. And at that point, I believe Bitcoin is going to decouple from the altcoins. The reason I believe this at the moment is because Bitcoin in this cycle is very different to other cycles in the sense that we have the ETFs now. And I know we're going to see Ethereum and Solana and other ETFs, but ultimately Bitcoin is going to decouple because the money that is flowing into Bitcoin on an institutional level, and even when you look at Michael Saylor and what he has done with his money glitch, because he has allowed people to create exposure into Bitcoin without even owning crypto. They can simply hold stock in his company. There are certain family trusts, there are certain treasuries, there are certain countries that are not allowed to buy Bitcoin. They are not allowed exposure to Bitcoin, but they are allowed exposure to the stock market. So they can buy MicroStrategies as a part of their strategy, a part of their portfolio, and get exposure to Bitcoin indirectly, which is friggin' genius on his part. I think it's incredible what he's done. And then all he does is he leverages his stock to create more debt to buy more Bitcoin. It's a very, very clever thing that he's done there. But because of these factors, I believe that the money that is flowing into Bitcoin cannot then flow out into altcoins like it typically would. And this is why I think we see a decoupling and Bitcoin goes on a run to 250K and everything else kind of gets left behind. Now, there's a saying that a rising tide, lifts all boats. And I do believe we are going to see altcoins growing value, but not at the same level that I expect to see Bitcoin. And typically what we can expect to see at the moment is if Bitcoin goes down 5%, top tier altcoins will go down 10%, mid tier low coins will go down 20%, and shitcoins will go down 40 to 50%. So that's typically what we see. It's why I've only, for the last sort of 6 years, not even that, 10 years now, for the last 10 years, I have pretty much only used Bitcoin as my indicator for trading. I've been following Bitcoin. I bought my first Bitcoin in 2014. I've been following it ever since. I did not get into the DeFi market until 2020. And so I do consider myself to be somewhat educated on cycles and how they work, but I also am a realist, and I know that the past doesn't equal the future. I'm also very interested in human psychology and the way that people react, because ultimately this market, and any market, is just human psychology. And not only how humans react, but how bots and programs are or systems are programmed to counter human reactions. And that's why we see a lot of manipulation in the markets, because a lot of it is already priced in. That is why I believe what we could see here, if we expect that we're trading in here, theoretically, we shouldn't break out to the south. We shouldn't. And so a lot of people that agree with this thesis might put their stop losses somewhere around here because they don't believe we're going to go down. And so they might put in a buy order and they might put a stop loss in here. So if I was smart money, what would I do? Well, if I was smart money, I would break that to cancel out those stop losses so that when we pump, there's a saying. There's something worse than the market going down, and that is the market going up without you. And so this is a typical example of manipulation where we could see what is called a fake out. I believe we still have some further falling to do. From where we are today, we could still see a potential 5% drop. That could happen in the next few days, this week. In fact, I believe from when I post this video, we have a week. And if within a week, 2 at the absolute most, this hasn't played out as intended, then you can invalidate this video and consider it to be bullshit. And I was wrong. And that's okay. I'm okay being wrong. I haven't got an ego. There's no dog in this fight. I'm just trying to help you understand my thesis. And then you have to make your own based on this and other factors. So this is what I believe is going to happen. I believe we're going to hit this line and we should bounce up. However, before that happens, I think we're going to get a manipulated fake out. And I think it's going to drag us down to this blue line, meaning we could see 55k Bitcoin. However, it is going to come back up as quickly as it goes down, possibly even on the same day, even within the same hour. It is going to cause mass panic. It's going to cause crazy hysteria. But this is going to liquidate all of those long positions that are currently being held. Now, we might even see, it is very possible, although I don't believe it, we could see a freak event. We could see something crazy that sees Bitcoin come down even to 50k. It might even break this red line because I don't expect it to. And because I don't expect it to, it could. There is a very real possibility for a temporary pullback down to 51k. So I have buy orders set at 52,000 Bitcoin. I think when we look at this here, I think that 52,000, which is, I apologize, 53,000. I apologize, 53,000. I believe at 53,000 Bitcoin, there is a great buying opportunity. So I have what I like to call a Hail Mary, if you like. It's it's a blind shot that may or may not fill. If it doesn't, it's okay. But if it does, great. So I have a buy order in, a sizable buy order. And also I'm considering that at the moment, if Bitcoin was to fall what I consider to be 19%, then Ethereum can look to fall anything from 30% to 40%. So I have buy orders in at Ethereum, 30% down from where it is today. Solana, down 40% of where it is today. Bitcoin, down nearly 20% of where it is today. I have those buy orders set because I believe if that happens, I'm going to make a lot of money very quickly. So, and if they don't fill, it doesn't matter. But now you understand that thesis. Okay, so now, and I think this is already priced in, so I'm okay talking about it. Normally I wouldn't bother. So then we see that manipulated fake out, which I think will come. And then we come back to here, and then we're business as usual. And then we trade up, we hit this, and then we're going to consolidate here for a little while, and then boom, off we go. And I think we're going to see this sometime around the end of July to the beginning of August. Now, it could potentially run to the end of August, which is why I'm saying at the moment, because I need a window, I can't be exact, somewhere between, possibly the start of July and the end of August. Those 2 months. Sometime in that 2-month window, I believe it's very possible that we have this breakout. And that is why I'm kind of leaving this here at the moment, because I think that is a pretty accurate reflection of where we are in the market. I think that shows my my belief, my understanding of where we're going to go. And this is another reason why we normally see in previous cycles, we see a 6-month window. And so at the start of the video, I told you that I have a feeling, but I might be wrong. So if this is the start of I consider this to potentially be the start of the bull run. Now, it could be here. It could have been from February. So 6 months on from February. So if you were to imagine, and again, I have to be slightly fluid here, but you've got February, all right? So then we've got March, April, May, June, July into August. That's 6 months. So we typically see a 6-month cycle. If you look here, from when we started to pump here to the top, you're looking at about 180 days, all right? 180 days from there to the peak, all right? So if we said, and that wasn't the run up, that was after the initial part. So this is the initial part. Maybe if this is the run up, if we look 6 months out from here, we're looking at August. Now, possible, that could be the peak, possible. But I think also we see something slightly different this cycle. So then we consider the halving event. Normally, you see a run up 6 months after the halving, which would be April. So then you've got April, May, June, July, August, September into October. So now somewhere between August and October, I'm expecting to see that blow off top, that huge pump. And then if we consider where we're looking to break, which is August, and if we break this in August, now we might break it before that. So if we were to break it in July, we'd have August, September, October, November, December into January. So the problem here is we're looking at January, February for an all-time high, and that doesn't sit right with me. It's a couple of months after previous cycles. So I do expect to see some volatility. I do expect it to follow somewhat the previous cycle. But again, this is why I believe November. I think November because I might be wrong. The peak may be in January or February. In fact, the peak may be in the summer of next year. But what I do not want to do now is what I did last season. And last season, I left too much money on the table because I didn't exit, because I thought the exact same thing. And I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. I stayed in November. If we look here, this was November of 2021. This was the peak. Me and a lot of other people stayed in at the peak because we believed that we were going to see a blow off top in January. And as a result, it never come back. I'm not making that same mistake again. And that is why I'm getting out in November. Hopefully this video makes sense. Hopefully this explains my thesis and why I keep continuously posting the same charts, because I believe right now, from everything that I'm looking at, from every technical factor that I can see, from every fundamental factor that I can see, it all kind of makes sense when I look at this. And then I'll just leave you on this last point, which I think if we look at the markets recently and we look at what's happened, I believe we've had what is known as a double top. A double top. Okay, so a double top is one peak, two peaks, back to here. So if we look at the distance from here to the top of this peak, it's somewhere around let's just say 6.5%. Okay, so from here, 6.5% down is going to put us somewhere in this range, which is another reason why I still believe we've got some further falling to reach this point. I don't necessarily think we're going to kiss the blue line, but I do think we're going to come somewhere close to it. I may be wrong. I do believe, as I said, we're going to have this potential pullback to here and maybe even here. But all of this is manipulated and it will not last. This, I believe, is genuine. Make of that what you will. Good luck in the cycle. I'll see you on the other side.